Welcome back. Tonight, we're leaving the safety of civilization behind and venturing into the heart of Africa's most remote wilderness areas, places where the line between life and death is measured not in miles but in heartbeats, where a single mistake can turn your dream safari into your worst nightmare. We're talking about camping in unfenced areas across Africa, from South Africa's legendary Kruger National Park to the vast expanses of Botswana's Kalahari, from Zimbabwe's untamed riverbanks to Kenya's Masai Mara. These are places where lions still roam freely, where spotted hyenas hunt in packs, and where a 3-ton bull elephant can appear out of nowhere in complete silence. What makes these stories truly terrifying isn't just the raw power of Africa's apex predators, it's how quickly things can go wrong. How a peaceful evening around a campfire can transform into a fight for survival. How the very animals you came to admire can suddenly see you not as a tourist, but as prey. The statistics are sobering. Every year, approximately 100 deaths occur due to wildlife-related incidents on African safaris. Hippos are responsible for around 500 human casualties annually, while lions kill about 70 people per year across Africa. But these numbers don't tell the whole story. They don't capture the moment of absolute terror when you realize that the canvas of your tent is the only thing standing between you and a creature that weighs more than your car. Tonight's stories aren't meant to discourage you from experiencing Africa's incredible wilderness, but they are a stark reminder that when you step into these ancient landscapes, you're entering a world governed by different rules written in blood and carved into the collective memory of every creature that calls Africa home. These are true stories, documented incidents, real people who thought they were prepared for anything the African bush could throw at them until the bush decided to throw something back. So settle in, keep your flashlight close, and remember, in the African wilderness, you're not just a tourist, you're part of the food chain, and sometimes you're not at the top. The morning of December 8th, 2019 started like any other family camping trip to South Africa's iconic Kruger National Park. The Jancy van Rensburg family had driven down from Johannesburg, their trailer packed with everything needed for what they hoped would be the perfect African adventure. 15-year-old Urko was particularly excited this would be his first time camping in an unfenced area where wildlife roamed freely through the campsites. They set up camp at Crocodile Bridge, one of Kruger's most popular rest camps located near the southern entrance. The camp sits along the Crocodile River, and as its name suggests, these prehistoric predators are regular visitors. But crocodiles weren't what the family was worried about. During the day, they'd spotted elephants, buffalo, and even caught a glimpse of a distant leopard. The wildlife viewing had been spectacular. As evening fell, the sounds of the African bush came alive around them. The deep grunts of hippos echoed from the river. Somewhere in the darkness, a lion roared, that unmistakable sound that makes your chest vibrate and your primal instincts scream danger. But they were safe inside the camp, surrounded by other families enjoying the same experience. The family had brought both a camper van and a tent. Urko, wanting to feel more connected to the wilderness experience, had asked to sleep in the tent pitched right next to the van. His parents agreed. After all, they'd be just a few feet away, and his uncle Johan was camping in his own tent nearby. What could go wrong? At 4:30 a.m., Urko was suddenly awakened not by his alarm, but by something far more terrifying. A hyena had somehow made its way into the camp and was now inside his tent. Hyenas are not the cowardly scavengers many people imagine. These are powerful predators with bite forces stronger than lions, capable of crushing bone with ease. And this particular hyena was hungry, aggressive, and had decided that Urko looked like an easy meal. The hyena clamped its powerful jaws around Urko's face and head. The teenager later described the sound of the hyena breaking bones in his face as chips breaking in a packet. But the nightmare was just beginning. The hyena began dragging Urko from his tent by his face, pulling him approximately 98 feet from the safety of his family's campsite. Picture that scene. A 15-year-old boy being dragged across the ground in complete darkness by one of Africa's most powerful predators, his parents sleeping just meters away, completely unaware that their son was fighting for his life. The hyena then did something that chills wildlife experts to this core. It sat on Urko, pinning him down while still gripping his face in its jaws. This wasn't a random attack or defensive behavior, this was predatory behavior. The hyena was preparing to feed. Finally, Urko managed to scream. His parents jolted awake, along with his uncle and other campers nearby. The commotion of people shouting and shining flashlights spooked the hyena, which released its grip and disappeared into the darkness as suddenly as it had appeared. Urko was rushed first to Mediclinic Nelspruit and then airlifted to Mill Park Hospital in Johannesburg, where he underwent 8 hours of reconstructive and plastic surgery to repair the devastating damage to his jaw and face. The surgery was later described by doctors as a miracle, both for Urko's survival and the successful reconstruction of his severely damaged facial bones. William Mabasa, a South African National Park spokesman, later explained the incident. Hyenas are smart and see campsites as sources of food. They explore with their teeth, and it was testing the waters. But here's what makes this story even more disturbing. SANParks rangers searched for the hyena after the attack but couldn't find it. They did, however, discover a hole under the camp's perimeter fence where the animal had gained entry. That hyena is still out there, somewhere in Kruger's vast wilderness, with the memory of how easy human prey can be. This incident shattered a fundamental assumption many visitors have about staying in rest camps, that somehow the presence of other people and basic infrastructure makes you safe. But the truth is darker. Hyenas specifically target campsites because they've learned to associate them with food. Every improperly stored meal, every food scrap left behind, teaches these intelligent predators that humans mean easy access to calories. The Janse van Rensburg family's dream safari became a nightmare that will haunt them forever. And Urko learned the hardest lesson the African bush can teach. Here, you're not a visitor, you're prey. And sometimes the predators come calling in the middle of the night. Brent and Linda had done everything right. They were experienced campers, veterans of multiple African safaris, and thought they knew the rules of the bush by heart. Never leave your vehicle after dark. Always inform someone of your plans, respect the wildlife, and maintain safe distances. They'd followed these rules on dozens of previous trips to Kruger National Park without incident. But on this particular day in 2016, the African wilderness was about to teach them that experience means nothing when the bush decides to test you. They had driven about 2.5 hours from their camp to explore a quiet, secluded side road where they'd heard good wildlife sightings were possible. The day had been phenomenal. They'd spotted elephants, various antelope species, and even managed some great photographs. As the afternoon wore on, they noticed several safari tour vehicles gathering in the same area, all watching the same elephant herd. Following standard protocol, they planned to leave with the tour vehicles before the gates closed at sunset. No one stays out in Kruger after dark. It's not just dangerous, it's illegal. When the tour guides decided it was time to go, there was a sudden rush of vehicles doing U-turns and heading back to camp, stirring up a dust cloud in the windless evening air. That's when everything went wrong. Attempting a 3-point turn to follow the convoy, Brent managed to get their front wheels about 2 inches off the edge of the dirt road. When he put the car in reverse and tried to move, nothing happened. They were completely stuck, beached on the side of a remote road as the last tour truck disappeared from sight. The realization hit them immediately. They were going to spend the night in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Alone, surrounded by lions, leopards, hyenas, and elephants. In a broken-down vehicle with no way to call for help. As darkness fell, the jungle came alive again. Crickets chirped, birds sang, monkeys chattered, and the roars of lions and trumpeting of elephants filled the air. The animals were celebrating the fact darkness had settled and the jungle belonged to them now. What makes this situation truly terrifying isn't just being stranded in big cat territory, it's the knowledge of what happened to others who found themselves in similar predicaments. Brent later recalled reading about an American couple that had a similar incident of breaking down in the middle of Kruger, who both were killed by the wildlife after they left their vehicle and walked off in different directions. They knew their only chance of survival was to stay in the vehicle no matter what. But as the night progressed, that simple rule became increasingly difficult to follow. The first visitors arrived around midnight. In the pitch-black darkness of the moonless night, they could hear something large moving around their vehicle. The sounds were unmistakable: heavy paws on the dry earth, the soft huffing of big cats investigating this strange metal creature that had invaded their territory. Leopards are known for their curiosity, and in Kruger, they've learned that vehicles sometimes contain interesting things: food, cooler boxes, sometimes even people who make the mistake of sleeping with windows open. Throughout the night, they could hear leopards and other predators moving around their car, investigating, testing, but the most terrifying moment came when they heard the deep, guttural roar of lions. Not distant roars, close roars. Lions calling to their pride members, possibly discussing the strange object that had appeared in their territory. Lions hunt in coordinated groups, and the couple knew that if a pride decided their vehicle was worth investigating more closely, there would be nothing they could do to stop them. Hour after hour, they sat in their car listening to the sounds of Africa's most dangerous predators moving through the darkness around them. Every shadow could be a lion. Every sound might be their last warning before an attack. They took turns sleeping, with one person always staying alert, watching, listening, praying that whatever was out there would lose interest and move on. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. When the sun finally rose, they were exhausted, terrified, but alive. Soon after sunrise, other vehicles began arriving for the morning game drive, and they were rescued. Back at camp, the staff had been worried sick. Linda's father had called the police to report them missing, but the police simply replied, "We will look into it." And when he called back in the morning, they were told the officer was on holiday for a week. This story reveals a chilling truth about traveling in remote African wilderness areas. When something goes wrong, you're truly on your own. Help might be hours or even days away. The animals don't care about your travel insurance, your emergency beacon, or your carefully laid plans. They only care about what you represent to them, and in the African night, you represent either a threat to be eliminated or a meal to be consumed. Brent and Linda survived their night in lion territory, but the experience changed them forever. They later overheard people at a hotel bar talking about a couple who got trapped in their car and stayed overnight in Kruger. When they revealed it was them, people couldn't believe it. Most people can't believe it, because most people never have to face the reality of spending a night surrounded by Africa's apex predators, with nothing but a thin sheet of metal protecting them from creatures that can bite through bone. But for Brent and Linda, it's a reality they'll never forget, and a reminder that in Africa, the wilderness always has the final word. The Cahora Bassa power lines cut a straight path through the heart of northern Kruger National Park, 50 kilometers of high-voltage cables stretching like a giant's clothesline across some of the most dangerous wilderness on Earth. For thousands of desperate refugees fleeing Mozambique's brutal civil war, these power lines represented hope, a navigation beacon that could guide them to safety in South Africa. They had no way of knowing they were walking directly into the territory of Africa's most voracious man-eaters. Between 1987 and 1992, an estimated 1.7 million refugees fled westward into South Africa each year, with many having little alternative to running the gauntlet of Kruger's predators. The park's uninhabited wilderness forms most of the border between the two countries, and for families carrying everything they owned, walking 50 kilometers through lion territory seemed like their only chance at a new life. The refugees traveled at night, avoiding flashlights that might give their positions away to guards, guided only by moonlight reflecting off the electricity pylons and the dimly visible maintenance track that shadows the power lines. When predators appeared, they tried the traditional defense, banging on iron pots to make as much noise as possible. This strategy might have worked in the early days, but it backfired to horrendous effect once this human migration became a predictable aspect of Kruger's ecosystem. The lions learned. What happened next defied everything wildlife experts thought they knew about lion behavior. Entire prides of 20 or more lions became specialists in hunting humans. These weren't sick or starving cats turning to easier prey. These were healthy, well-fed lions that had discovered humans were abundant, predictable, and relatively easy to kill. The notorious Klopperfontein Pride became legendary among park rangers for their brazen attacks on humans. In one unprecedented incident, they even tried to pull a female park staff member from the back of a crowded pickup truck. When park officials finally decided the pride had to be destroyed, the team sent to shoot them simply had to summon them by battering on pots the lions had learned to associate that sound with human prey. But the true scale of the horror was hidden from the outside world. Park Ranger Neville Edwards discovered the grisly reality during a routine patrol when he found a jackal feeding on what remained of a refugee, a woman's hand, still flexible, meaning she hadn't been dead long. Edwards, a veteran ranger who'd seen everything the bush could offer, was so traumatized by the scene that he radioed for help in Zulu rather than English, desperate to shield visiting tourists from the truth. The power lines had become a killing field. Thousands of heavily loaded, ill-equipped, famine-weakened people were attempting to cross what is essentially Africa's largest predator preserve, traveling at night when lions hunt most actively. "Doctor," Antonio Camacho, a lion specialist who was himself mauled by a lion during his research, put the situation in stark perspective. When lions kill humans in Kruger, they are merely doing what comes naturally. The refugee walked into her turf and triggered the attack. What makes this story truly disturbing isn't just the scale of the predation, it's how it changed the lions themselves. These prides had put to rest the long-term myth that big cats only turn man-eater when they're sick or starving. These were healthy lions that had simply added humans to their regular prey species. One refugee, a man named Koza, survived the crossing and later described how his group encountered lions multiple times during their 2-day, 2-night trek across the park. The next night, they moved again, and again the lions found them several times during the night, but the herdsman stood firm, careful not to trigger an attack. Koza is now a wealthy, legal resident of South Africa, the father of 6 children. But despite his success, he no longer walks at night. The memory of those lions finding his group again and again throughout their desperate journey has never left him. The refugee crisis eventually ended, but not because of any humanitarian intervention. In 2005, the South African government finally admitted Mozambican visitors for up to 30 days, opening legal pathways into the country. The human migration through Kruger dropped to a trickle as safer routes became available. By then, the damage was done. Prides of 20 or more lions had spent years feeding on human prey, learning that people were not just edible, but abundant and predictable. Park officials had to euthanize entire prides that had become too dangerous to allow near any human activity. It's impossible to estimate the total number of people killed by lions during this period, but wildlife experts believe it may have been the largest instance of predation on humans in modern history. The power lines that promised salvation became highways of death, and the lions of northern Kruger earned a reputation that still haunts the park today. The refugees thought they were crossing an empty wilderness to reach the promised land. They had no way of knowing they were walking through a hunting ground where they were the prey, and the predators had learned to associate the sound of their distress with dinner. In the African bush, desperation doesn't guarantee survival. Sometimes it just makes you easier prey. December birthdays should be celebrations, moments of joy surrounded by family and loved ones. For a Florida woman turning 37, her husband had planned what seemed like the perfect gift, a guided canoe safari along the legendary Zambezi River in Zimbabwe. It was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, paddling through one of Africa's most spectacular waterways, watching elephants drink at the river's edge, and maybe catching a glimpse of the crocodiles that call these waters home. What was supposed to be a memorable birthday trip took a tragic turn when a hippopotamus attacked the woman during the wildlife tour in December 2018. Most people think of hippos as chunky, docile creatures that spend their days lounging in the water and occasionally yawning for tourist cameras. This couldn't be further from the truth. Hippos kill around 500 people each year in Africa and are considered the deadliest large mammal on the continent. They're territorial, incredibly aggressive, and despite their bulk, they can move through water faster than any human can swim. The birthday celebration was going perfectly at first. The guided canoe tour had launched from the Zimbabwe side of the Zambezi, one of Africa's great rivers that forms the border between Zimbabwe and Zambia. The guides were experienced locals who knew the river intimately, and they'd taken hundreds of tourists on similar trips without incident. Wildlife sightings had been spectacular elephants on the shoreline, crocodiles basking in the sun, and the incredible bird life that makes the Zambezi famous among safari enthusiasts. But rivers in Africa are not just scenic waterways. They're highways for some of the continent's most dangerous animals. And hippos treat these waterways as their personal territory, to be defended at all costs. The group initially tried to paddle away from a group of hippos along the right side of the river when they spotted them ahead. This is standard protocol: give hippos a wide berth, don't get between them and deep water, and whatever you do, never get between a mother and her calf. But hippos don't always follow human expectations. One of the animals suddenly came out of the water and capsized the canoe, dragging the woman underwater. Picture this nightmare scenario. You're celebrating your birthday in a canoe on an African river when suddenly 3 tons of angry hippopotamus explodes out of the water next to you. The canoe flips, you're thrown into crocodile-infested waters, and a creature with jaws that can bite a canoe in half is dragging you down into the murky depths. Hippos don't attack humans for food, they're actually herbivores. But they attack for territory, and when a hippo decides you're a threat, It doesn't just bite once and swim away. These giant predators will happily ensnare any potential threat along the riverside, usually drowning their victims. Their bite force is powerful enough to crush bone, and their massive jaws can snap a human body in half. The woman disappeared beneath the surface of the Zambezi, held underwater by one of Africa's most territorial predators in a river known to be home to Nile crocodiles, another of the continent's most efficient killers. For her husband and the other members of the tour group, those moments must have felt like an eternity. Was she already dead? Would the hippo release her, only for the crocodiles to finish what it started? Fortunately, one of the guides on the trip was able to grab the woman and pull her to safety on the riverbank. But safety is a relative term when you're stranded on the shore of an African river, miles from medical help, with a severely injured person who's just been mauled by a hippo and nearly drowned. This incident highlights one of the most dangerous aspects of African wilderness adventures. When things go wrong, they go wrong fast, and help is often hours away. Unlike accidents in developed countries where emergency services can reach you within minutes, a medical emergency in the African bush becomes a race against time across vast distances with limited resources. The woman survived, but her birthday celebration became a nightmare that will haunt her and her husband for the rest of their lives. What was supposed to be a romantic adventure became a brutal lesson in just how quickly the African wilderness can turn deadly. Hippos, despite their seemingly docile nature, are known to cause more deaths than any other large animal in Africa due to their aggressive behavior when they feel threatened. The Zambezi River, like most African waterways, is their domain. They don't share it willingly, and they don't give warnings before they attack. The couple had done everything right. They'd hired experienced guides, used proper equipment, and followed all safety protocols. But in Africa, doing everything right is sometimes not enough. The wilderness plays by its own rules, written over millions of years of evolution, where anything that enters an animal's territory is either a threat to be eliminated or prey to be consumed. The woman's 37th birthday became a day she'll never forget for all the wrong reasons. It was supposed to mark another year of life. Instead, it nearly marked the end of her life. In the Zambezi River, birthday celebrations can become funeral preparations in the space of a heartbeat. And somewhere in those murky waters, the hippo that attacked her is still there, still territorial, still ready to defend its stretch of river against the next group of tourists who think they understand the rules of the African wild. These stories aren't meant to scare you away from Africa's incredible wilderness. They're meant to remind you that when you enter these ancient landscapes, you're not just a tourist. You're stepping into a world governed by rules written in blood, carved into the survival instincts of every creature that calls Africa home. The one common thread of predator attacks on campers is that they happen after dark. Lions, leopards, and hyenas are opportunistic hunters, meaning they will take whatever comes their way, including humans. But darkness isn't the only danger. As these stories prove, African wildlife can be unpredictable any time of day. The key to survival isn't avoiding these places, it's respecting them, understanding the risks, and never forgetting that in the African bush, you're part of the food chain. Whether you're planning to camp under the stars in Kruger, paddle the Zambezi's waters, or track lions through the Serengeti, remember these stories. Remember Urko's midnight visitor, Brent and Linda's night in lion territory, the refugees who never made it across the power lines, and the woman whose birthday became a nightmare. The African wilderness is beautiful, magical, and utterly unforgiving. It will show you wonders beyond imagination, but it demands respect. Because in Africa, the difference between an unforgettable adventure and an unspeakable tragedy is often just a matter of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sweet dreams. And remember, in Africa, something is always watching from the darkness.